Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting throughout the world and around the United Kingdom. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m, broadcasting on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on TikTok simultaneously. And for folks who are watching on TikTok, the best experience can be found at our YouTube site, youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. Please, folks, send in your comments, send in your questions. We'll do our best to answer them tonight. But we've got a lot of good news, largely, to get through as well, because it's been a very constructive week in the British firmament. There's been several good articles which have been published in the national mass media, which we're going to be going through in a minute. It's also our 3-year anniversary of our magazine Union Heart, which we launched this day, 27th of July in 2019 in the great British town of Campbeltown, when our Thin Red Line was there in order to meet and greet the Scottish nationalists and remind them of how lucky they are to live in our fantastic United Kingdom. And we've got lots of pictures of that famous day coming up towards the bottom of this hour. So folks, please do tell us what is on your mind. And we've got lots of people already coming in on YouTube and on Facebook. And Kat Mack says, tuning in from East Ayrshire again tonight. Great to see you, Kat. Good evening, Alistair, and all pro-UKers. Absolutely, this is where the pro-UK team hang out. Adam says, North Lanarkshire Council leader resigns over various sexual harassment allegations. I didn't know that. That must be breaking news. Sandra Law says, I'm an AFFG newbie from Lincoln. Good to hear from you, Sandra. Hello to all the pro-UK people out there tonight. Well, there's a good team of us out there tonight, including Emma Jones says, hey Alistair, good to see you. Good to see you too, Emma. Hope you're well tonight. Catherine says that she used to live in Buxton, and Sean says Buxton is lovely. Well, it is a fantastic tourist area, so I hear. I've never been there. And Raymond is tuning in from Mosley in Newton Abbey, standing firm for the Union, says Raymond. Absolutely, stand firm. Never surrender when your back's against the wall. Never surrender. Stand up and fight them all, said the boys from Barnsley back in the day. Good evening to Harry Brown. Good evening, Harry. And Marilyn says, God bless you, Alistair. You're doing a brilliant job. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, that's good. Everybody who's involved is doing a great job for A Force for Good. We can't do it without the assistant producer behind the scenes here. We can't do it without our Facebook editor who makes sure everything is going well on Facebook. We cannot do it without our graphic designer, without our political outreach team, and without our social media team, and without our security team. So thank you to everybody as well. It's not just me here, it's all of these great folk deserve their thanks. Alan says, evening all. Hope to hear more from you tonight, Alan, and from Stephen also, and Sean from Ilkestone, Derbyshire, which is a lovely part of the country. And it is part of the country because our country is one country, it's one nation, one UK, not so much a union of nations but a nation of unions which have been built up through the centuries and millennia. And let's talk about that right now. And Debbie, good evening to you, Debbie. First in was Debbie tonight. Good evening to you. So let's talk about that, because there's been some good stuff has been appearing. On Sunday, the Labour peer, Lord Foulkes, had this article in it was in the Scottish Mail on Sunday. I don't know if it appeared elsewhere in the UK. He says, I believe that Sturgeon's illegally using your cash to fund Indy ref, so here are 4 things the UK can do to stop her. Now, this, of course, is apropos of the Scottish Nationalist administration simply going ahead using our money in order to pay the British civil servants who work for them to figure out ways to break up the United Kingdom. And she's put 20 million aside in order to pay the British civil service, who are not her employees, they're actually the British government's employees, to break up the country. Isn't that absolutely mad that we're paying via Sturgeon to the British civil service for it to sit down using its finest minds, who are on tens and tens of thousands of pounds a year, in order to figure out how to break up the country? Now, if that is not utterly mad, then I don't know what is utterly mad. And thankfully, as a consequence of ourselves and others pointing this out, it's begun to filter through, and Lord Foulkes has been doing a yeoman's work in bringing this to the attention of those who will listen in the British government. And unfortunately, so far, that's not actually been very many. But of course, we've got this big turnaround in the British government at the moment. We're going to get a new Prime Minister, whatever you may think of him or her. And so it is a moment when that Prime Minister becomes a new Prime Minister. That is a moment when they could, if they chose to do so, they could really get working on all the things that Lord Foulkes is suggesting and that others have been suggesting. And what Lord Foulkes comes up with here, and I'll just briefly run through the 4 points, is that the UK government could cut the Scottish government budget by the amount which they're spending wrongly, which is to say 20 million. However, as he points out, all that would mean is they would still spend that money anyway, and it would simply mean that they would cut other areas that were much more necessary. So that's really not an option. He says ministers and civil servants responsible for this illegal expenditure could be considered for suspension or discipline. And that's a possibility, but unless the law is crystal clear, then they will simply take you to court. And it would run through court and all that kind of nonsense. So that's not really an option either. Thirdly, the British government could consider whether it might be possible to use the courts to stop such action. But again, that's not really likely, because it's not that they haven't been prohibited specifically from doing it, and that's what the Scottish nationalists would argue. And so that would go right up to the Supreme Court, and it would drag on and on and on and on. So really the only option is the 4th option, which he gets to here, which is simply to write a law to prohibit it. Write a law to prohibit it. It's that bloomin' simple, guys. It's that bloomin' simple. And you know what? We have written the law. It's basically 6 paragraphs, a law to stop the civil service pushing the Indy agenda. Now, I have a law degree, as it happens, from Strathclyde University, so I was able to craft that in legal terminology. And that's basically it, tight down, how to stop them doing it. And that appears in our magazine, Do More Together. And we have been sending this material to our lawmakers and to our legislators, and so they know how to do it. But that's what has to be done. So good for Lord Foulkes for putting that out in the Mail on Sunday, on the 24th of July. Good for him, good man. And let us hope when this new moment comes along, when we have a new Prime Minister, that they will start to enact this material. Okay? Now, the second article, which is extremely good, is an article by a fellow called Stephen Daisley. And let me just share that to the screen if I may. I won't. It's a clickbaity title, which is very confusing. I would not have chosen that. He says, "I won't defend the union anymore, neither should you." Now, what he's trying to say there, basically, is that we should stop defending it and we should start celebrating it. That's his point, which, of course, we entirely agree with. In fact, as he says here, he goes, "I don't know about you," he says, down here. Let me get it. Yes. "I don't know about you, but I, for one, am fed up talking about defending the union and being asked by politicians on either side of the border how to, quote, save the union. It is the most successful political, social, economic and cultural project in modern history. It doesn't need to be defended. It needs to be celebrated." It needs to be celebrated. And he's got one or two good ideas here about how to do that. But the biggest idea simply is to flip the switch on the Scottish nationalists. Stop being put onto the back foot where you're defending, where you're doing your best to try to save, and instead absolutely flip the switch, turn the tables and start promoting the absolute benefits, and not just promoting the benefits, but creating a new, as he says here, the union's best days ought to lie ahead of it, and they can if the occupant of 10 Downing Street believes so and governs accordingly. Stop finding ever more innovative ways to carve up the UK's political settlement. Instead, build new UK-wide institutions that serve Britons equally, regardless of where they live, and which also subtly reinforce the ways in which the UK is a single, unified country. And he even suggests here a new UK national police force would be immensely popular with voters, he says. Stop being so gloomy about Britain's future. And this is what we're facing, declinism. Okay, politicians without motivation, politicians without inspiration, inspiring less. Is that's a word, which it's not, but lack of inspiration. That's what bedevils our political class. Absolutely. He even says, introduce a Duke of Edinburgh-style British Youth Awards scheme for teenagers across the UK. A voluntary youth service promoting civic duty, solidarity and patriotism with employer-recognised achievement certificates. All of that sort of thing we would add is about bringing the Scots and the English, the Welsh, the Northern Irish together to actually meet each other, share experiences together. These are important things that help to build the sense of one nation. Without those things, you don't have that sense. People just start to atomize again. So he's got lots of very good ideas there, and you'll find that article up in the comment thread. And it makes the point, stop being hemmed in by a devolution so-called settlement that never seems to hem in the SNP. That's a good point. How much do they care about it? Goodness me. How much do they care about following the constitutional devolution settlement? They just do what they want. It's only the British government that seems to be hemmed in. The UK government should build a UK centre of excellence in the study and treatment of cancer in Dundee, he suggests. Well, absolutely. These are all sorts of ideas, blue sky thinking. But once you realise that, you realise everything's on the table. And let's celebrate the UK instead of constantly trying to defend it. And more than just celebrating it, let's create new projects. And we did suggest lots of lots of projects in our 40-page magazine, Do More Together, which is available at our shop. Alan says, Lord Folks often mentions the SNP's wrongdoing, but does anyone listen or act on what he's saying? At the moment, no, but he does, unfortunately, Alan. That's the problem that we're facing. I hope so, but I don't see results. Exactly. 00 Mo says, splendid polo, Alistair, thank you. And whoever becomes the Prime Minister, says Stephen, should not come to Scotland and allow Sturgeon to grandstand by basically getting sat in front of Sturgeon and having to walk up the steps. Sturgeon does her Cecil DeMille thing as if she's the Emperor, the Queen of Sheba. You know, she stands at the top steps of Bute House and forces the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom to walk up the steps to her, head bowed, up to the Queen of Sheba at the top of the steps, where she gives them a grumpy handshake. Oh, I've got to meet you. You've come up from England. No, none of that happens. You invite her to your place, okay? You invite her to the UK government hub in Edinburgh. And if she decides that she doesn't want to come to that, then fine, she doesn't have to come to it. But you don't go to her, okay? That's completely the wrong optics for the leader of the United Kingdom. But we've told them that. Other people have told them that. Will they listen? Let's see in due course whether they listen or not. Stuart says, cool shirt. Where did you get it? I got it from John. Well, it's Hackett, the shop Hackett. So it must. I think that was in George Street in Edinburgh, but that was several years ago. Whether it's possibly no longer there anymore. Ryan says, with all due respect, Alistair, Stephen Daisley, much like many other commentators, is still hung up on trying to make devolution work. Devolution is an abysmal failure that ought to be consigned to history. Now, there was also so many good stuff, so much good stuff this week. There was also another good article this morning, which you'll find in the comment thread as well, from the Scottish Daily Express. And it was pointing out something that Kevin Haigh had said. Now, Kevin Haigh runs an organisation called These Islands, and he made a really clever metaphor about the United Kingdom. And he said this, he said, nationalists seek to frame the debate as Scotland being a distinct part of the UK as somehow just the result of a voluntary union, as opposed to Scotland being an integral part of Great Britain as the result of an incorporating union. Okay, so rather than just like a voluntary union, when Scotland and England came together, they actually created something which was entirely different. They created a new being, a new creature, a new country. In fact, it was incorporated. It incorporated Scotland and England into something new. And he uses this metallurgical metaphor. He says Scotland was not welded onto England and Wales by the Act of Union in 1707. It was alloyed with them to create Great Britain. Okay, now what is a weld? A weld is when you join together metal parts by heating the surfaces so they melt together. And welds can be pretty strong, but they can also be snapped. What is an alloy? An alloy is a new metal which is made by combining two or more metallic elements. Okay, so rather than just being joined, rather than just being welded, Scotland and England were actually an alloy, a new creation that came from the two fundamental elements. A third element was produced. So he says Scotland and England were alloyed with each other to create Great Britain. Breaking up Britain wouldn't be like breaking a weld, it would be like splitting brass. back into copper and zinc. It would be like splitting brass back into copper and zinc. Very clever metaphor, which we're going to remember and which we're going to use. Great Britain isn't a weld, it's an alloy. And when we say Great Britain, we're talking about all of the United Kingdom, of course. We use these terms interchangeably. Even though the Scottish nationalists don't, we do. We use these terms interchangeably to mean all the parts of the British Isles that identify as British. Freddie says, good evening from the great British city of Stoke-on-Trent. Keep up the good work, guys. We absolutely will. And thanks for checking in, Freddie. Hope things are well in Stoke-on-Trent. Today is our 3rd year birthday of this magazine, Union Heart, which we launched on this day, on the 27th of July in 2019, while our Thin Red Line was out in Campbeltown. And so after this segment, which is on this day in British history, now I said on this day the Scottish nationalists were traipsing through, of all places, the great British town of Campbeltown, down on the Mull of Kintyre. And of course, that was in 2019, and we had to get down there and we had to show them what time of day the Unionists thought it was, which we did very successfully. And we followed them all over Scotland that year when they were having reasonably good attendances, but nothing, of course, close to what they said. But we had about 40 people that day, and they had exactly 954 people, and not the 2,000 that they lied about. But we got some really good photographs of the event. Let's just run through them. Now, those elderly people in the motorbikes there, they led the procession, and they were perhaps too infirm to actually walk the course, so they had to ride about in their motorbikes, and the police were at the front of that with a wee red flag saying, careful, elderly and infirm people on motorbikes, following behind. And the leader of the gang there at the front has a t-shirt that says McConnachie, which is yours truly. McConnachie is a bawbag, which was perhaps his considered opinion of yours truly. And that created great hilarity on all sides, it should be said. Still does create great hilarity. It's and on the back of his t-shirt he said, if you're reading this, a force for good have fell off. Okay, so that was quite fun. Anyway, so these elderly and infirm folk, they did the wee thing on their motorbikes, and then the march followed thereafter, and it's down on the shores there of the Campbeltown Loch, and we actually sung them a wee song. We said, far do we travel, and much do we see. Scot gnats bust in from as far as Dundee. Face-painted marchers with banners so dire as they wobble the streets of the Mull of Kintyre. Mull of Kintyre, Scot gnats strolling in from Dundee. Our desire is always to count them on Mull of Kintyre. So we counted them in, as I say, at 954, and it was actually pretty good because they decided to lap the whole place twice, maybe because the route was short or not, I don't know, but they went round one way and then they came back round again because they were just enjoying it so much. Sorry, I thought I got that wrong. It was 974, not 954. Scrub that. 974 they had. 974. I knew there was something there. 974, not 2000. There's some of our great folk there flying the flags, okay? There. And these lads were on the route as well, and they had decorated their flat. They were ground floor flat as well, so good for them for giving a good British welcome to the Scottish nationalists, who basically went down to Campbeltown to make a nuisance of themselves. Okay. And there's some of our people, not all of us, lined up for a group picture after the event. Okay. And that was also the day, as I say, we launched the very first Union Heart magazine. So that was us at the Mull of Kintyre at Campbeltown on this day back in 2019, 3 years ago today. Now, what also happened on this day in British history? On this day in British history, we had the Battle of the Tea Cakes. Now, what is the Battle of the Tea Cakes? The Battle of the Tea Cakes is a little-known skirmish which occurred in the War for the United Kingdom in the early 21st century. To be specific, it was 5 years ago today. And this was when a group of Scottish nationalist ragtags got it into their head that they would protest Tunnocks, because Tunnocks caramel wafers were being exported with a Union Jack on them. Now, they decided to hold a small demonstration. There was only 5 of them. They decided to hold a demonstration outside of Tunnocks headquarters on the morning of the 27th. But on the morning of the 27th, our spies in the ragtag camp had discovered their plans, and so a Unionist skirmishing group was rapidly assembled to meet and engage with the Scottish nationalists at the corner of the Tunnocks HQ headquarters, led by this legend. There we go, led by this legend, lover of tea cakes, especially Tunnocks tea cakes. Now, in the next shot here, we have got, that's a long-range photograph of the actual skirmish going on. Now, if we home in on that with the next photograph, you can see at the front there are 4 people, and they're holding a Scottish Resistance banner. But coming in on their flank are the Unionist skirmishers, holding a large Union Jack, holding small Union Jacks, and holding Tunnocks tea cakes, and that looks like a packet of caramel wafers, high and proud in the air. And they're coming in order just simply to mess up the optics of the Scottish resistance. And the next photograph shows the extent to which they were able to do that. Well, there's a close-up of them moving in on the chief Scottish ragtag there, who's attempting to block them with a rather pathetic homemade poster, much to the amusement of our great team of folk. Next photograph. There you go. In the background, you can see one of the Unionist soldiers holding up caramel wafers in the shape of a V for victory behind the Scottish resistance chap who is getting largely irritated by this. And the next photograph, again, note the extent to which the Unionists were able to mess up the optics there of the leader of the Scottish ragtags with the Union Jack in the background. Fantastic. So that was on this day, the Battle of the Tea Cakes on the 27th of July, 5 years ago at Uddingston Street Corner at the Tunnocks headquarters. And the result was, needless to say, an overwhelming Unionist victory, because the Scottish ragtags fled the scene. They fled the scene very quickly on the arrival of the Unionist skirmishers. So another successful event chalked up for the Union. Good stuff. Lots of good comments coming in. Just trying to see what I've got. Alan says, looks like he's resisting using his brain. Nelson says, this goes to show we really are a force for good and they fear us Unionists. The Battle of the Tea Cakes when the separatists were defeated by our Unionists. Absolutely. Hi Marianne, good to see you're in here live. Stephen likes the alloy metaphor. A single unitary composite nation consisting of 4 parts, Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And Ian, on the similar theme, goes, the Union was a historical event that created a kingdom. It's not simply a bind of 2 things, it's a new thing. It's absolutely. And Anita comes in saying, remember James VI of Scotland, who became James VI of Great Britain, of course, was a relative of Elizabeth I. Yes, he was Mary Queen of Scots' son. And not a lot of Scottish nationalists know that. And so I'm glad you remind us of that. And that also, Anita, reminds us of a new series of articles which we're doing. We published the first one this week. It's a new series of Scottish unionism. The origins of Scottish unionism. Okay, the origins of Scottish unionism. And you'll find the link in the comment thread. And we these are articles that we've published before in our old legacy site, but we're going to just bring them all over onto the current aforceforgood.uk site and republish them all. And they begin at the beginning, back in 1521, and we're just looking at all the important unionist commentators going right back to the 1500s, to the early 1500s, and working through. And the aim, as we say, is basically to show that British unionism is disproportionately a Scottish innovation, and also to show that the idea of Britain as one nation, the idea of being British, the culture of Britishness existed long before the actual parliamentary union of 1707. And that's not something that's brought out often enough. So we're going to be doing that in our new series, which is going to be appearing. We're going to try to get one article out there every week, probably for the next 20 weeks or so. So that's going to be another fantastic service that we are offering to the field of British unionism. Thanks to the one person in particular who wrote most of those articles. I've written some of them, but another colleague has written most of them. And Scotsman goes, remember when they had to turn the mics up at George Square because of our whistles result? Wasn't it just? That was when Sturgeon came. That was when we attempted and successfully telt Sturgeon. And that's us, Scotsman. You might be in there somewhere. You must be. And when Sturgeon took the stage, every single one of us had a whistle, and we started to blow it. And that is when she got so outraged. Remember when that classic video of her going that Scotland's inclusive, yeah, and she's getting really angry, and then she goes, but not for Tories. She got so riled up because of us whistling and jeering. That was a big result for us. That was the first time anybody had, the first time a large group of people had actually protested her presence. And guess what? She's never tried that again in Glasgow. She's never tried that again because it was too embarrassing for her. Fantastic work that we did then. Now, it's time for busting indie myths. Because we are busting indie myths on the daily, weekly, monthly and yearly until the Scot Nats see clearly that we're down with the capital A to the double FG. In this Busting Indie Myths Part 16, we are going to be addressing the oft-heard myth that sovereignty in Scotland belongs to the people, but somehow in England it doesn't belong to the people, it belongs to the Parliament. In other words, the idea that sovereignty in Scotland and England is different. Well, that's nonsense. Sovereignty in Scotland and England is the same. Firstly, what is sovereignty? Okay, sovereignty is just a fancy name for authority. Okay, now where does the idea that political authority in Scotland is somehow different in England, where does the idea come from that here in Scotland the people are sovereign, but somehow the poor old English are not sovereign? It's only their Parliament that's sovereign and somehow bosses them around. Where does that idea come from? Well, primarily it comes from a point of view which was expressed almost 70 years ago in court in Scotland. In 1953 there was a court case, a civil case, and one of the judges, there was 3 judges, one of the judges expressed a point of view which was not relevant to the judgment that they actually made, but simply expressed a point of view which is called an obiter dictum in law. It carries no real legal authority whatsoever. It's just simply a point of view. And he expressed the point of view, quote, that the principle of the unlimited sovereignty of Parliament is a distinctively English principle which has no counterpart in Scottish constitutional law. I'll say that again. The principle of the unlimited sovereignty of Parliament is a distinctively English principle which has no counterpart in Scottish constitutional law. Well, that's very much debatable, actually. However, let's take him at his word. What he's talking about there is the sovereignty of Parliament. Fine, the sovereignty of Parliament, the authority of Parliament. Where does that particular view about Westminster come from? It comes from the constitutionalist A.V. Dicey, who wrote the classic work Introduction to the Study of the Law of the Constitution. In it he said, the right to make or unmake any law whatever is parliamentary sovereignty. And further, no person or body is recognised by the law of England as having a right to override or set aside the legislation of Parliament. Well, okay, that in itself is not controversial at all. All he's saying there, when he says no person or body is recognised by the law of England as having a right to override or set aside the legislation of Parliament, is just kind of obvious on its face. That's the same in every single country in the world. An individual cannot set aside a law that Parliament has made. Whatever the Parliament may be, you have to obey the law on pain of arrest. Okay, you can't set it aside. You can't pretend that your Parliament's law doesn't exist. Here in Scotland, I can't go out on the street and pretend that a law that Holyrood has created doesn't exist. I am, whether I like it or not, compelled to obey it on pain of arrest, on pain of imprisonment. Okay, that's A.V. Dicey said nothing in particular about England that wasn't also the case in the rest of the world. But here is where the issue comes down to. Dicey was talking about parliamentary sovereignty, which is to say legal authority. The Scottish judge was talking about legal authority. Of course, Parliament has legal authority. It makes the law and enforces the law. Neither the judge nor Dicey were talking about democratic sovereignty. Democratic sovereignty is the ability of the people to elect their government at elections, okay? So what neither Dicey nor Lord Cooper, the Scottish judge, made any account for was the different types of sovereignty. There is democratic sovereignty, and we talked about this in our magazine Happy and Glorious, where we spoke about the Queen being a symbol of democratic, legal and national sovereignty. For those are the three issues: democratic sovereignty, legal sovereignty and national sovereignty. Democratic sovereignty, we say, is exercised by a people whenever they vote to establish a new parliament. This can be expressed as the sovereignty of the people, the authority of the people. The second is legal sovereignty, which is exercised by any democratically elected parliament to create and pass its own laws. Without legal sovereignty, a parliament would be unable to function as a parliament. And that is expressed as the sovereignty of Parliament. And thirdly, we have national sovereignty, which is the authority of the national Parliament to govern with no foreign political and legal interference, or at least as little foreign political and legal interference as possible. And you'll remember that Brexit was all about national sovereignty. So the democratic sovereignty of the people is expressed at the ballot box. The legal sovereignty of Parliament is expressed when it makes laws, and the national sovereignty of the nation is expressed on the world stage by the institutions of the state, whether the Crown, whether the Parliament, whether the government, whether the Prime Minister, or the other institutions of the state under their control, such as embassies and armed forces. Okay, so there's three different types of sovereignty, and these fundamental types of sovereignty, democratic, legal and national, are the same worldwide and identical, certainly, in both Scotland and England. But oh my, the Scottish nationalists do like to pretend as if there's something different about Scotland. And even in the national newspaper, recently, Nicola Sturgeon talking about our new paper shows the only blah 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 blah, and she writes down here, Nicola Sturgeon, she doesn't like Westminster and it can't be fixed because Westminster is, quote, founded on the principle of Westminster sovereignty. Rather, the system, I should say. She goes, quote, a system founded on the principle of Westminster sovereignty. So she's that's a wee dog whistle out there to the Scottish nationalists to say, yeah, Westminster's sovereignty is different from our sovereignty. English sovereignty is different from Scottish sovereignty. It's a wee dog whistle in order to try to convince her followers that somehow Scotland has this more advanced concept of sovereignty than England, that the Scottish are so much more democratic than the English, that our constitutional position is that we, the people, are democratic, but in England, these poor English peasants, they're still suffering under a feudal system where Parliament tells them what to do. It's all complete nonsense. Complete nonsense. It just simply, she's simply not properly looking at what the different types of sovereignty are and where they are most effectively exercised and expressed. So that ends this present busting Indy myths. GRH Brem says, great job you're doing. A quick question. You more than anyone come into contact with the Nasty Party supporters on a regular basis. Do you find they are getting more aggressive with their anti-union rhetoric and it's only a matter of time before they call for civil disobedience in our dear land? Well, that's a good point, sir. And one's obviously got to be quite careful in answering that particular question. However, there are people who are writing in the national newspaper right now who are basically implying that that's what they would like to start calling for. And I'm just seeing if I have that particular article within reach, because I was looking at, I had to wade through on Monday, I had to wade through 6 copies of the National that I hadn't read yet. And what a day that was. What an absolute day that was. And it's depressing to have to do that, by the way, but I do it so that you don't have to do it. Okay, it's my job to read these fruitcakes. One thing that does come out though of it is that there is a great unhappiness among the Scottish nationalists with the state of British government, and in that sense, at least, I totally get where they're coming from. It's like, I know your pain, because myself and others also experience that pain. Many of us are completely unhappy with the Westminster system as it's operating at the moment, but that doesn't mean that we want to break up the United Kingdom as a result. It means that we want to reform those things. We want to make them better. We always say separation is not going to solve it. Okay, separation is only going to make it worse. If you think things are bad politically at the moment, wait until you have 4 squabbling countries in the British Isles, 5 if you include the Republic of Ireland, all squabbling with each other. And we would be squabbling at a far greater rate and a far greater intensity than we happen to be squabbling at the moment. And we just have to look to history to realise the truth of that. So the Scottish nationalists do have a fruitcake brigade that do call for civil disobedience. Whether that would ever happen or not, I don't know. We've seen in the last 2 years that the Scottish people are extremely passive along with the English people, and they'll basically do whatever the authorities on television or on Good Morning Britain tell them to do. So I don't hold out the expectation that somehow people are going to get out of bed and start running down the streets complaining about things. Quite the contrary, in fact. But who knows how things could change in the future. The important thing, though, is that we keep pushing the pro-UK message. And talking about pushing the pro-UK message, we've slightly improved our YouTube front page, youtube.com UK A Force for Good, and we're hoping that it's going to bring us in some more subscribers, because like basically right now we've been broadcasting on our YouTube channel since 2013, okay, almost 10 years ago, and we've only got 1,400 subscribers. Now that's utterly mad. Utterly mad. So we've given it a wee kind of a revamp here. If you go into it while we're broadcasting live, prior to us broadcasting live, you'll see the upcoming live stream there. You can click notify me, and when we go live, it will tell you when that we're live, and it hopefully will also be playing while we are live. Want to just check up on that. But folks, if you haven't subscribed to us, please do subscribe to us. Please do share our message, because we need more than 1,400 subscribers on YouTube. It's just not right. Okay. It's just not right that after 10 years we've only got 1,400 subscribers on YouTube. We are putting out 4, sometimes 5 videos a week on that platform. Many of them are short videos. We're doing a live regularly. We've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos up there. I mean, it's like, why is that not more? It makes no sense. Especially when you look at other channels, they've got like 20, 30, 40,000. And they've broadcast very rarely, certainly not as often as we do. So it's a total mystery. We don't want to look on any kind of dark side of that. We don't want to look on some kind of conspiracy level. So we're presuming it's something wrong with what we're doing. But if you've got any suggestions, please tell us. But please do subscribe if you can. You'll need a Google account, though. You'll need a Google account. Alan says, if everyone just watches if everyone who watches likes it on YouTube, it may start to push it a bit. Yes, please do like it, and if you can share it from YouTube, that also helps. And if you can subscribe. Okay, folks, it's the top of the hour. Thank you very, very much for watching. It's gone very quickly tonight. I hope it's been entertaining to you. Thank you to everybody who has watched. We will be back next week. Now, we'll be out this Saturday, as I say, so if you want to join us this Saturday, send us an email to contact@aforceforgood.uk and we'll tell you where we're going to be and what we're going to be doing to keep the British end up in Scotland. So, folks, if we don't see you at the weekend, until next week, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the Queen. See you next week.